In the spring of 1984, at the height of the bitter fight over French language rights in Manitoba, the NDP government fell so low in the polls that eventual defeat seemed inevitable. Now, as they head toward next Tuesday's voting day, Premier Howard Pawley and the NDP seem within striking distance of a political victory.
The latest polls in the province give Howard Pawley's New Democrats a 5-point margin over the Conservatives led by Gary Filmon. But the race is still close, and as the Journal's Bruce Yucato reports, the final results could be decided by a dozen key swing seats along a great divide that splits the province both geographically and politically.
This is winter carnival time in Lorette, Manitoba, near Winnipeg, and it's the mothers taking on the sons. The mothers were heavily favored, but they're doing their best to throw the game. The guys here are gradually pulling ahead.
Breakaway.
That pulling ahead kind of feeling is one that opposition leader Gary Filmon would love to share, with a slightly larger goal in mind, as it were.
Good to see you, John.
This is a Saturday morning campaign stop in one of a ribbon of ridings strung across the province. Ridings that are crucial to Filmon's hopes to lead his Conservatives back to power. Lorette is a small town, heavily francophone. A rural hamlet till lately, it's on its way to becoming a bedroom suburb of Winnipeg. And the local member here is an NDP cabinet minister.
Where's my Minister of Municipal Affairs?
Welcome to Springfield.
Great to see you. I like all those orange signs.
The town has played host to Premier Howard Pawley as well. It is no coincidence that both leaders have come through here. Razor-thin majorities in key ridings like this one helped put the NDP in office in 1981.
Very well. On the move.
Pawley himself has said that but for the grand total of just 1,400 votes in 10 swing ridings, the NDP would have lost the last election.
We're fighting that everywhere.
This is Winnipeg's Portage Avenue. It is, of course, half of the renowned intersection of Portage and Main. It is also, in a way, the great divide of Manitoba politics. There are NDP strongholds to the north of here and Tory bastions to the south. This political fault line, if you will, runs clear across the province and divides it neatly by class, by ethnic background, and by political preference. On a map, that line would look like this, up from the southeastern corner through Winnipeg and beyond, all the way to the Saskatchewan border. To the north and east of the line is essentially the have-not part of the province, less well-off economically and a melting pot of sorts, with large numbers of East Europeans, Francophones, and Native people. This is NDP country. Just across the fault line, the farmland is richer, incomes are higher. The heritage is British, the politics decidedly conservative. The key to power in Manitoba is the dozen or so ridings that straddle this fault line, ridings that mirror the province-wide divisions within their own boundaries. It has been the case time and again. In 1977, Ed Schreier's NDP government fell when the Tories, led by Sterling Lyon, dominated these swing ridings, extending their political domain north and east. The surge of Tory blue was strongest along that part of the line which runs through Winnipeg. And when political fortune shifted in 1981, the geopolitical seesaw merely tilted the other way and brought Howard Pawley's current NDP government into office. Now in 1986, both major parties are again coveting those fault line ridings that inevitably lead to power in Manitoba.
We will bring legislation forward at the next session of the legislature.
From the outset in this campaign, Pawley has used the standard campaign tactics. Promises delivered with the appropriate backdrop for the 6 o'clock news. Like this hydro sale announcement at the Limestone Power Site, a pet Pawley project in northern Manitoba.
The NDP has worked hard to build.
Even in their TV ads, the NDP has seized on the Limestone project as a grand symbol of good economic management. The Tories dismiss this as a mega maybe, but it has been the centerpiece of the NDP's re-election campaign.
And now limestone, potash, and more hydro sales promise an even better future. All over Manitoba, people are working because of the work of the NDP. Stand up for Manitoba. Vote NDP.
Hi, how are you?
These are grain farmers in Beausejour, Ed Schreier's hometown and one of the NDP's northeastern strongholds. They, too, are being asked to stand up for Manitoba.
Best grade in the country.
Must be because New Democrat.
You betcha.
Campaign strategists deny that slogan is just a good old-fashioned piece of Fed bashing, only it just seems to be so obvious. Paul Thomas is professor of political studies at the University of Manitoba.
Partly to avoid talking about their own record, they're trying to attack Ottawa and shift the blame for the size of the provincial deficit and the difficulties they've had in funding the social policy sector, the health care and educational sector onto the federal government, saying federal cutbacks are to blame for the fact that people who live in those fields or work in those fields haven't got the money they need in recent years.
It's not against something, it's for Manitobans, standing up on their behalf. I think that's very, very important. Manitoba want a government that will stand up on their behalf, not be biased because of a political connection to Ottawa.
And when it comes to standing up to Mulroney and the Conservatives for our
This ad's
fair
portrayal
share
of the Prime Minister as public enemy number one is one of the few belligerent chords to be struck during the campaign.
Well, I think there's no question that unfair federal government actions towards Manitoba impacted negatively upon the Conservative Party. I think that was secondary to a positive attitude towards the provincial government.
The NDP's calculation is that Brian Mulroney has indeed become fair game as the federal Tories have plunged in the polls. That Ottawa's high-profile spending cuts in Manitoba have made Mulroney a liability to the provincial Tories. One NDP cabinet minister said he detected more interest in the recent Philippine election than in the current provincial one. And that absence of rancor, if not interest, is something that suits the NDP just fine. The government has in fact staged a remarkable political comeback here by keeping things low-key. Less than 2 years ago, Howard Pawley's New Democrats trailed the Conservatives by over 35 points in the polls. Actually, they're running the campaign much like Pawley and his cabinet have run the province the last 2 years, treading ever so warily since they fumbled the French language rights issue so badly they seem destined for political oblivion.
They've avoided the French language controversy, which ripped this province apart a few years ago, and any other issue like abortion or any other social issue that's terribly loaded with emotion and difficulty for the government, they simply backed away from and not dealt with it.
Opposition leader Gary Filmon acknowledges the issue that once seemed to be paving his way to power is not a factor in the campaign.
There was virtually 80% opposition to that, so you can imagine that showed up in the polls in terms of a backlash against the New Democrats. That's obviously something that never could nor ever would remain as an issue.
This is a suburban Winnipeg YMCA, the morning after the Tories' first big campaign pronouncement, a lengthy 32-point social program. Filmon, an ex-college basketball star, has no trouble keeping up with this senior citizens fitness class. It is a textbook, if slightly awkward, photo opportunity to illustrate just how Filmon's Tories can relate to senior citizens and the less privileged. But the point is lost when there's no policy statement to back this up. And in any case, the only other TV camera rolling here is one shooting Filmon's own campaign commercials.
We understand that if we wanted to manipulate the media, we'd set up a news announcement each day of a single item that was different from everything else we've talked about. We prefer not to try and manipulate the media into that, but rather show them that ours is an overall plan.
If there was a plan, we could do better, a set outline that we could follow, and then that the people could see, and to see if there are results.
The thinkers here at Conservative campaign headquarters feel it's important to emphasize the party has a new man with a plan to match. It is very much the soft sell, to reassure voters their polling is said to show have become cynical.
That's good.
Implicit as well in the party's new plan pitch is a much more moderate strain of conservatism. Filmon's theory is that true blue right-wing politics in Manitoba leads only to a long stay in opposition, though it seems not all in the party have been converted. Here, Conservative organizers cringe as their candidate Paul Harriott fires off this anti-Pawley diatribe.
And remember, this is not the CCF party of old that we're talking about here, or even the NDP party of Ed Schreier. They want to establish by law what kind of salaries our employers should pay us. They want to tell us what we're worth. And if that's not bordering on communism, I'd like to know what is. And I'll tell you, it makes me mad. And I say, get out of my way, because I tell you, we're coming through.
Yeah, I offered the advice that that wasn't in keeping with the normal tone that I had set for the campaign. And my instincts are ones of moderation in all respects. I've said that flaming rhetoric is not my style, and stirring up great animosities is not the way in which you create a good government. And
I'm game for anything.
This is Liberal leader Sharon Carstairs, indulging the media's appetite for silly pictures. Her campaign bus is no more than a two-door Audi. But here she gets her points across, using a playground as a backdrop for her policy announcement on daycare. The Liberals have no seats here and don't get many votes, and Carstairs would be happy, indeed fortunate, to win her own riding of River Heights.
If you can't get the leader in the legislature, then the chances are you're not going to get anybody else in the legislature either. I have to give the appearance of running a winning campaign in River Heights. If I give that appearance, and I think we're doing that, then that, of course, reflects on the other candidates' campaigns. And so people begin to say, aha, they've elected Sharon, so let's go on to elect a few more so Sharon has company in the legislature.
The Confederation of Regions Party won 9% of the vote in the '84 federal election, with an anti-metric, anti-bilingualism platform. They're running 14 candidates this time. And the Progressive Party, led by former NDP Cabinet Minister Sid Green, is running 13.
Promise anything.
Mr. Tillman, that's exactly what I want to find out from you.
This leaders' debate on province-wide TV was maybe the last chance for some smoke and fire in the otherwise placid campaign.
We all know we are running an annual...
There were a few sparks, but in any case, NDP negotiators had arranged to have this debate buried this past Saturday, after the hockey game. When all is said and done, it will still all come down to the seats that straddle the line that runs along Portage Avenue. The ridings created by waves of immigrants brought decades ago by the CPR will still belong to the NDP. The more affluent farm and suburban ridings to the south will still go heavily Tory. The NDP currently holds 9 of the fault line swing ridings, and the Victory Party next Tuesday will be at the headquarters of the party that dominates those dozen ridings this time round. For the Journal, this is Bruce Yacato near St. Malo, Manitoba.